It's fitting that this panel has been dealing with the topic of historical and contemporary applications to orthodoxy and humanitarianism. Coincidentally, tonight the Washington National Cathedral is hosting an ecumenical service led by the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church that will include the President of Armenia. Over 100 ecumenical representatives are expected to attend the service tonight in solidarity. The anniversary of the genocide of the oldest national Christian church brings to mind how the Orthodox and other ancient Christian communions have borne the brunt of anti-Christian persecution over the centuries. This means that when many people think of humanitarian aid and orthodoxy, we think of interventions on behalf of the Orthodox. But our panel this afternoon has broken new ground by shifting this common narrative from the victimhood of the Orthodox to many resources within the faith for humanitarianism, including both individual charitable action and corporate intervention. We've learned from these papers that Orthodox Christians serve the poor, the needy, and persons victimized by social and economic systems. We've learned that orthodoxy carries theological, spiritual, and material resources within itself to meet these challenges, past, present, and future. Now, each of the four panelists introduced a different angle on this important topic. Dr. Kiru argued that the historiography of humanitarian relief and intervention typically leaves out the contributions of the Orthodox, even though the Orthodox tradition of humanitarianism goes back to Byzantium. He showed how the Greek Revolution and subsequent events in the 19th century Ottoman Empire stimulated the merger of humanitarianism with humanitarian intervention. Kiru makes the compelling argument that Russia and Russian Orthodox believers were the greatest contributors of humanitarian aid during the Greek Revolution. The common Orthodox identity between Greeks and Russians was, in his argument, the key to the massive outpouring of aid from Orthodox to Orthodox. And yet, secular scholarship has largely ignored this history. Metropolitan Makarios contributed to the discussion from the perspective of pastoral theology, including the spiritual and theological resources for Orthodox humanitarianism. From his perspective as hierarch and African missionary, His Eminence represents Christ in serving the poor. This humble service is based on Orthodox tradition. His Eminence lamented the decline of the traditional role of the diaconate as responsible for care to the poor, and this was in a part of his paper that he didn't have time to read. Although outsiders might criticize this charitable approach as unsystematic or inadequate, His Eminence defends charity as essential to being the church, and he stresses over and over that care for the poor calls orthodoxy back to itself, to its core identity. Father Luke Veronis reflected missiologically upon humanitarianism in Albania in dialogue with the missiology of Archbishop Anastasios. Father Luke highlights the Orthodox view that every person is created in the image of God. This is the root of Orthodox humanitarianism. In the case of Albania, after the destruction caused by atheistic communism, Orthodox missions brought both the spiritual message of hope and practical help with food, clothing, medicine, agriculture, water projects, and so on. But the essence of this love in action was the building of relationships across religious and ethnic boundaries. And in this, he argues, we find hope, even after the humanitarian aid has ended. Professor Eleni Kasaluri employs political, economic, moral, and biblical perspectives. to unpack the terrible, challenging situation in Greece today. She reminded us of the biblical and Pauline vision of a new Christian social reality. She argued that crisis leads to new opportunities to act differently. In the current crisis, the Orthodox Church of Greece is providing relief even in distant parts of the country where the state is not functional. She notes that while this is good, she also argues that true charity must lead to justice. So essentially, she is reminding the Greek Orthodox Church that its mission must go beyond charity to a public theology. I think she's calling for a public theology, namely a quest for justice. Now together, these 4 papers represent a rich matrix of reflection on Orthodox resources for humanitarianism. They approach the subject from different methodologies, ranging from the historical and social analysis to pastoral and missiological reflection. Collectively, they find that even when things are the worst, when Orthodox and others are suffering, the action and reflection of the Church still provides hope. This is common in all of these papers. These papers suggest that even narratives of suffering should incorporate the memory of humble Orthodox witness through charity and outreach. So I think in this collection of papers, we see the beginning of a new narrative. And this narrative deserves further construction, further work, namely to argue that Orthodox tradition and practice are a vital foundation for holistic humanitarianism in the past, the present, and we also trust in the future. Now, I'd like to throw out a few questions of my own, and I'm not going to address them to a particular person, but if anyone feels like they'd like to respond, you're welcome. And if not, we'll just keep opening up to the discussion. So I have 3 questions that I reflected upon reading all the papers. The first question is, what more can we do to recover this lost history of Orthodox humanitarianism, including its connection with Orthodox values? What can we do to recover this memory that we've lost? A second question is, how is the charitable tradition of Orthodoxy today similar or different from that in the past? What are we doing today that's different from what we've done before, and what's the same? And my final questions are, how should Orthodox humanitarianism change or evolve to meet the challenges of the 21st century? And since the title of this session was about transformation, presumably that means we're evolving into something better, or we hope. What does transformation mean according to our tradition of Orthodox humanitarianism?